When we planned this event 6 months ago, our intention to discuss the difficult issue of transition to democracy, which key issue for us of Africa. We have a number of military rules here and there, etc. And the challenge of moving a country from a dictatorship into civilian rule. When there's lack of institutions, process, etc. And we thought the case in Sudan would be very interesting, where we had 30 years of Islamicist dictatorship in the country, which squashed all civilian institutions, parties, etc., changed school curriculum, trying to brainwash everybody, looted the country, etc. And how the challenge of moving then after all this time because you have to remember the young people who carried out the revolution in Sudan were all born under this dictatorship. How can young people who brought up under the dictatorship went to school which taught them rubbish, how could these people later on change the country? What is the challenge? And we still need to maybe touch on that because it's an important issue for us, the challenge of building institutions and how to move forward. Of course, events happened, very sad events, and we witnessed a major crime today in the streets of Khartoum, when we have those wonderful generals fighting in the city. It's just criminal, in my view. But also, I think that is changing the scene. We need to talk also about what's happening here. First, Abdalla, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And you have been in the middle of this. And I noticed, Dr. Hamdok, you have not talked much about what's been going on. You have been quite careful in dealing with the delicate situations, but I think it's time to talk now. Yeah? We should.
Okay. Mo, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. You know, your theme of this year is about global Africa. But I think because of your commitment to home, and we say charity starts at home, I would like to think you had this special session inserted in this discussion, which is really about the globe. But I think it's also relevant.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What he's saying is that I'm slightly corrupt. Fair enough. In his diplomatic way. Okay.
You know, Mo, these are sad days for Sudan.
Yeah.
More than 3 years ago, when I heeded the call to go back home and lead the transition, there were hopes for Sudan. Things were rising. Let me start by saluting the young women and men who sacrificed their life to topple the longest dictatorship in our recent history. I'm a born optimist, eternal optimist. And let me turn now to the issue of transition. You know, transitions by their nature, they are nonlinear. They never travel in a straight line. They have their ups and downs. But I think the Sudan transition this time is very complex, very different, has so many issues with it. Well, you know so well, after independence of Sudan in 1956, of course, many of our brothers and sisters, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, they think Ghana was the first independent African country, 1957. We were there just a year before. But I think for the more than 6 decades, we did not manage to get our national project right. This time in 2019, when we toppled this last dictatorship, it was the third uprising. You know, we toppled Aboud, General Aboud in 1964, Nimeri in 1985. Those transitions came about in a different environment to this one. Paradoxically, each time we had a military dictatorship, the next one that followed is almost double the period.
More brutal.
And absolutely, and more brutal. They perfect the game. Aboud lasted for 6 years. Nimeri was 16 years. This last one was 30 years.
So
you
expect
can see the
Burhan or Houmetti to stay for 60 years now?
God forbid, but I think history
But
will
I see your
probably,
point,
yes. Yeah. But I think, let me just briefly maybe point out some of the difficulties of this transition and challenges we have faced.
Take us first through the timeline. Revolution started on 28th of December. Was it 28th of December when it started?
Yes.
It took about 3-4 months until Bashir was kicked out. And then we had the sit-in, the great time, revolutionary time in Khartoum, people singing, writing poetry, people embracing each other, people from Darfur, from the south, from the north, getting together, discovering. And it was interesting to hear that people in Khartoum did not have enough information about what was happening in Darfur. It is very interesting to see the social media at the time. Then we had the massacre of the young people at the time, and the military thought by killing 200-300 people that they're gonna really kill the revolution and establish the rule. That did not happen. And the street went out again. Was it the 30s when we had the biggest, biggest demonstrations? And then the soldiers had to sit and negotiate with the civilian. And I have my friend Labbat here. Where is he?
Yeah, he's somewhere here.
Where is Labbat?
Musa.
He fell asleep. We're talking about you, Labbat, and you fell asleep. So he was in the middle of the negotiation. And then you agreed some form of uncomfortable marriage between civilians and the military. And you were brought by the civilians as their candidate to be prime minister. Tell us about the challenges you had when you became, in this uncomfortable situation. You have the military here in the Supreme Council. You are a prime minister, senior position. I'm not sure how much power really you had. Little. Important areas were not under your control. Judiciary, which is utterly corrupt, was not under, you could not do anything about it. Changing the laws, the whole area, defense, security, of course, that's also police, everything is out. Tell us about this period. How,
Sure.
Please.
Before getting into that,
let
me just maybe on the timelines.
Okay.
You know, we think what the time of Bashir when he was toppled in April 2019, that was an event.
Yeah.
But the revolution was an accumulative revolution. It started in 1989 with the coup itself.
Yeah.
And then the resistance that followed. So many uprisings. 1990, the 28 soldiers who were massacred, then the war in Darfur, the 2013, and a number of other uprisings. So this has been an accumulative struggle of the Sudanese people, culminated in the downfall of the regime in April 2019. The timeline that followed, you perfectly outlined it. We came to office, as I said earlier, heeding the call of the nation, we formed the first government in September. We came against a very challenging background in every aspect of life. On the political front, we had to face huge expectations, and rightly so, by our people.
Of course.
Because they sacrificed a lot. They expected, like the following day, everything should be right.
Improved. Yeah.
Improved. Of course, there is a need to appreciate that there is almost, as you rightly put it, destruction in every sense, mismanagement in every aspect. But also within the political challenges, we had to manage not only expectations, but also ability to stay the course, a unified front, continue the consensus that toppled the regime. It's a very challenging one.
Yeah.
Because everybody was behind that flag. But when the regime was overthrown, everybody went and lined up behind their party or region or other flags. So the seeds of the fragmentation started there. This was a very challenging task. Then also the other elements of the democratic dispensation. We had a task of organizing the Constitutional Conference. You know more so well, for the 6 decades long, we did not have a permanent constitution till now. It's a big deficiency. Then the other one, the issues of election law, organizing the election itself and all that. Nothing in that happened.
And you had no money.
The economic front, and this is probably one of the major challenges we faced, a collapsed economy. You name it, all the macro indicators were wrong. High inflation, interest rate, budget deficit.
And sanctions.
On tax, Sudan was collecting less than 6% of tax to GDP. You cannot run a decent government on that. Then the structural issues of the economy. And on top of this, the debt, mounting debt of over 60 billion. Then the sanction compounded all this. But also the ability to agree in that fragmented space on an economic program. You know, we have a broad spectrum of views. And you know it very well more. On our extreme left, there are people who don't want to hear the word World Bank. And the right, and then anything in between. How do you manage this? An ability to form a program, put it together. It was a huge challenge. Then on top of this, the transition took place against civil war in the regions, in Darfur, in the Nuba Mountains, in the Blue Nile.
There is another 11 militias or 12
well,
armed movements.
Yes, I actually don't call them militias because this is an issue which also points to the complexity.
I'm not a diplomat or prime minister, so I just, yeah.
The complexity of the relationship between the center and the periphery.
Yeah.
Its dynamics, its issues. There are issues related to underdevelopment, marginalization, managing of diversity, and all these issues. So the first task, we started the negotiation with these armed groups in Juba. It has its own challenges. They are fragmented, there are so many, which meant at times you have parallel negotiating tracks. But also, this was part of regional and international interest and issues. But we managed. We had a partial agreement, which we call the Juba Agreement, brought most of them in. The other challenge is the restructuring and building state institutions. As you rightly put it, you mentioned the judiciary. It's not the judiciary only. We inherited a dysfunctional institution, 30 years of destruction. Civil service, public sector, on all its, even the private sector. More than that, the political parties themselves, civil society institutions were all destroyed. parties were fragmented as a deliberate policy. It's not because they are agreeing on this or that. Then we had so many other challenges, not to mention we are very unlucky. After 6 months of the transition, the whole world was hit by COVID.
Oh.
And you can imagine, on top of it was also the floods. Again, it's resonated very well with the discussion on, and the discourse on the climate change and all that. It's a plate full of challenges, and we had to manage this. In an agreement, in a power-sharing agreement with the military, the Prime Minister had very little, probably, control over so many issues. We don't have money. Thanks to the international community, they came to our rescue, but it was
Labad
very
did
slow.
not do a good deal, did he? He gave too much power to the military.
I don't think so, Mo.
We'll give you a chance to comment, okay?
You know, when Labad, carrying the flag of the African Union under the leadership of my brother Musa,
Yeah.
and the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, also the IGAD and all that, when they started engaging the Sudanese project, they came at a time followed the massacre of June 3.
Yeah.
Just barely 1 month and a half after the change, we had that very, it's a massacre, the least to say about it. And the whole thing collapsed. But
And
because of the revolution was very
trouble,
light.
I mean, you trying to access funds from the IMF or the World Bank, I think that was a nightmare.
It is, because you see, we were under sanctions for close to 30 years.
So they cannot deal with you because
No,
they're
they
under
can't touch
sanctions.
us. They can't touch us
Yeah.
because first, to start any step in this, we had to clear the sovereign debt of the multilaterals, MDBs, the World Bank, IMF, and the African Development Bank. And here I would like to thank really the effort exerted by our partners in many parts, but the US played a major role in this. France, you were part of that, the UK, and many others, Sweden, Norway.
We appreciate the positive role
Ireland.
played by Macron and
Absolutely.
Charles Michel and various
we
people.
had to
Chairman.
pay close to 3 billion debt for these multilaterals. So that would pave the way for these institutions to allow the sanctions to be removed. But also it has a very serious impact on the debt issue.
Yeah.
As I said, we inherited about 60 billion of debt.
But among all these difficulties, it seems to me that the main problem probably which caused the setback was the division among the civilian forces at the end. Yes, you had economic problems. It took a long time to convince Trump to lift the sanctions when Sudan is no longer a state supporting terrorism. Actually, they put the guys in prison. And there's no reason not to lift the, but anyway, the transactional approach of Trump and his administration took a long time, which is not helpful.
Over a year. And also,
not helpful at all.
We had very serious...
Because you cannot speak to the IMF or the World Bank before you remove the sanctions.
Absolutely.
So, and then you needed to also, remove the support for fuel and for, because these were requirements also for the World Bank and the IMF to reform the financial support for some of essential stuff, which of course is not very popular. And
that's a very interesting issue, of the economic reform program which we embarked on as part of discussion with the IMF, which helped us to reach what we call the fast tracking of the program, UCT, which allow us to reach a decision point in HIPIC in 6 months, which is a record time. And for that to happen, we had to take very serious decisions. The subsidy issues was there from the 70s, not only started with Bashir. Successive government, and this is true all over the world, government are very sort of caution about taking a decision on subsidy.
Yeah.
But for us, it was very clear. The subsidy was supporting a very small segment of our population.
Yeah.
So the egalitarian issue is not there. But also, it's absorbing every penny that we have, which should go to education, to health. We remove subsidy from just fuel, not bread, not electricity.
That was very brave, but an accurate
Absolutely,
decision.
it was very brave, but also we had hoped that if the support from the multilaterals would come easily and fast, that would cushion. We have no illusion that that reform program.
I think there is a point here for the various discussion really about how the slow movement, the slow action of the international multilateral organization, etc., can really undermine the democratization process. It's just they have so many, and it is the system. It is not the individual. I mean, I had an endless discussion with David Malpass and Kristalina, and those guys have tremendous amount of goodwill towards Sudan.
This is
But
resonate very well.
their hands are tied, how to get things. The whole system really need, and I hope our friends in later sessions will carry on this discussion.
That's why I'm saying even this is on Sudan, but it resonates very well and talk to the issues that we are been discussing today.
So that happened, and then the fragmentation of the civil society, which that's your base, your support. People brought you to power. Those guys really fell apart.
It's true.
And that enabled now the militaries to start to play games again, I think.
You know, from day one, I have been impressing on the civilian side of things that it was our unity that toppled the dictatorship. And we should not lose track on that.
Yeah.
We should have been staying the course as a unified front. And I went into so many successive initiatives. I put an initiative in June 2021 about bringing everybody together. And I was telling them time and again that to protect the transition, we need to stay unified. But you see, as I said earlier, the moment the change happened, everybody went behind their flags.
Yeah.
And they started, of course, demanding all kind of
Everybody
things.
wants to have a minister in the cabinet, to have this.
That is part of it, but also the programs themselves. They were very fragmented.
Go left, some people go right, some people.
Exactly.
And when the whole process, you just need a democratic country. And after you get a democratic country, you guys fight among yourselves.
And this is against the background of the legacy of the former regime, and also the inability to appreciate the strengths of the former regime operatives.
Of course.
We were working so hard trying to dismantle the party state in favor of a nation state. This is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
We had needed a unified political front to push for that. But I think, I don't know, this is probably an issue which is not unique to Sudan. I would like to think also many of maybe even the Arab Spring, probably experiments, which point to the fact that the change has happened, but you were facing what I could call an incoherent political leadership, a flat structure that takes forever for any decision to happen or agree on anything.
We all agree
proposal.
on he must fall. تسقط بس.
Yes.
But what after the fall of the dictator?
Yes.
We don't have an agreement, and that's a problem.
In a large degree, there were so many slogans.
Yeah.
I was handed in objectives of 14 objectives for the transition.
Then there was this creeping coup then.
Yes.
For a few weeks preparing the theater for their coup. And I thought maybe you got wind of that. You felt that...
It was an open secret.
Yeah.
We call it the creeping coup.
Yeah.
And we discussed it and all that. Actually, 2 months before the coup of the October, 25th October.
And you were placed under arrest.
I was arrested first, and then...
Yeah. You put under house arrest after that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So you're still arrested, but maybe in a better
Yeah,
environment.
it's like a prison. I have no access to any...
To anybody and
It's
everything.
very monitored and controlled access.
Right. Then the street erupted.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of pressure on the soldiers. And they came back to you and you negotiated some other form of power sharing. And you came back to be prime minister. A few weeks later, you saying that was not a deal, really.
Yes, true. You know, this is a very interesting
Yeah.
subject, and
Would like to hear this.
Me and you, we talked about this for
Yes.
a number of occasions. You know, when I reached the agreement with the military after the coup, after 1 month of house arrest, I had 4 objectives of this. Number 1, to stop the bloodshed. And it happened. Number 2, to put a brake on the coup itself, in the escalation, and essentially to protect the achievement of the 2 years and a half.
Yeah.
Yes. We did a lot of good things. I don't want to mention them today. I think it is known to everybody what we have achieved in a record time there. And then third, to again start the transition, release the political detainees, and also reverse the decision that were made by the military in the first week of the coup. All that happened for more than a month. We signed this agreement on 21st November. It went all the way up to end of December. We did all this. But I started seeing they were reneging on that agreement. And the stroke that broke the camel back was the 30th of December, when killing started to happen again. They killed 6 of our demonstrators, of our young, talented people.
So the killing did not stop, actually.
Yeah, well, for a while after I signed the agreement,
but then it started again.
But then it started again. And I felt, well, this is something which I
That is not I signed
and
up.
I made it very clear from day one I took office that the moment I feel that I would not be able to fulfill and work on the things that I committed myself to do, I will leave.
Okay.
I never came there with an ambition to have office or anything. I just heeded the call, and the time that I felt this is not working, and I resigned. I told the Sudanese people that we did good things. We did maybe we got it right, we got it wrong in some areas, and this.
I think there's some,
I resigned and left.
yeah, Abdullah, I think there's some important lessons
Yes.
to draw out of this. And I understand you're writing your memoirs. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm writing, if you could call it memoir or a book or whatever, but this is with the support of quite a number.
Yeah, but I think it is really important to draw the lessons from this.
Absolutely.
Not only for Sudan, but for the rest of the countries. And the one lesson, I don't know about you, the one lesson I draw from all this, never trust the military. That is the one lesson I trust. So my brother Musa, with all those crazy soldiers running around and never trust those guys. Never trust. Power and money are toxic. And never trust those guys.
Well, you see,
That is that's right. I don't know what you're going to write in your book, but anyway.
No. I think this is an excellent thing. I think, I guess the Sudanese experience on transition is not only relevant to Sudan, it's relevant to many places in Africa, and I would like to think even the global South. So the lessons that could be teased out of this
Right.
are in the thick of writing this. But if I can just mention a few of them, you are absolutely spot on the military issue.
Okay, we agree at least in one thing here. Good, excellent.
Okay. You see,
But
I went all over the world talking about the Sudanese model, which is a partnership between military and civilians.
I remember
And
I
said
remember
this
listening to you. Yes.
Absolutely. And I would always qualify to say the partnership between military and civilians, and I would say paradoxically, to qualify it, to build democracy and restore democracy. I think this issue would need to be revisited in the context of the emerging coups.
You were wrong, Abdallah, correct? Time for self-criticism.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but you see, it's not about, I don't think it is an issue of right or wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. I think more as now you are old and gray, life for you cannot be black or white.
Okay.
You will have to stay in this gray area where there was decisions had to be taken. And here I would like to commend the effort made by Labad and his team and AU and everybody else was help us. It was a time when Sudan was almost collapsing.
Can I ask you really to thank Labad here for the time he spent? Can you stand up? And we thank you really for the time. Sorry?
Yeah, I'm saying Labad, AU, IGAD, Ethiopia, our international community friends, they all helped us for putting together this.
That is a great role the African Union played.
Absolutely.
And we look forward for really more involvement from the African Union in trying to solve. You talk about African solutions for African problems. Show us.
Yeah.
Solve the problems. Now, let us fast moving now. And we are here today. While you are sitting here, we have those crazy generals in Khartoum fighting in the capital. Yes. More civilians dying than their soldiers. People intoxicated, in my view, intoxicated by power, money, and each of them think they can become the new Bashir. What the hell is going on? And where are we going to go from here?
See, Mo, this is a very sad episode and sad situation in Sudan today. War, loss of life, devastation in anything you can think about. Shortage, the killing, of course, and shortage of food, medicine, shelter, security, anything you can think about. I think whatever the causes, reasons that took us here, the number one priority today is this war has to stop.
To stop the fighting.
To stop today before tomorrow. Because it has so many ramifications if it's not stopped today.
How can we stop the fighting?
Before getting to that, I would like to take this opportunity to labor a point home, the grave situation that has to be addressed, and if it is not, it will have implications not for Sudan, for the region and the world. Sudan is the largest country in that area, bordering 7 countries, across the sea, Saudi Arabia 8. God forbid if Sudan is to reach a point of civil war, proper engulfing the entire country.
Syria, yeah.
That will be the other places, not Syria, Yemen, Libya will be a small play. This is a huge country, very diverse, ethnic, religion, whatever. I think it will be a nightmare for the world. But also, we have came to understand and know from these ongoing civil wars in other parts of our region, if you do not address it in the early days of it, it degenerates into a long
fire, yes.
Absolutely, and compounded with the current global environment, the new geopolitics, it has all the ingredients of bringing in various
I think we all agree, and I think all the international envoys, I think we have a number of international envoys here. Can you stand up, please? The envoys here. Yes, of course, Rabat. I thought the Norwegian and the European Union and the British envoys, and I don't know. Anyway, they may be having talks somewhere. But all those guys here. I also saw what we call in UK, ABC is here. Is he around? Please, the Archbishop of Canterbury is trying also to work on, in his way also to help in South Sudan. And not only you, also the Pope the other day went and tried. I mean, these are another set of criminals there, but we'll see. Anyway, God help you. we're not able to deal with it, so we have to ask God to come and help. You know, it's a nightmare. Anyway, sorry, how are we going to stop this madness?
You know, I don't think it's
What are the scenarios? What are the possibilities now going from here?
the possibilities is just for first thing we need to do is to start a humanitarian ceasefire,
Okay.
which is possible. Happening everywhere in the world.
But even if you have war, if there are people shooting and bombing from the air, and how can you provide humanitarian assistance in a war zone?
That can only happen if we have a sustained engagement by everybody.
Ceasefire?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to think there is a positive thing that happened on this issue of the evacuation.
Yeah.
So there must have been some sort of an engagement with the
We are aware of all the
yes, which allowed this to happen. I think the same approach could also be sustained and continued to help the generals to allow first stage of humanitarian ceasefire, if that holds for a while, and we don't have any option but to sustain this pressure from everybody, from Africa, AU, IGAD, the region, Arab League, Gulf, Egypt, the rest of the world, the Troika, the Quad, European Union, everybody. I think we need to guard against fractions, splits, and speaking with different kind of approaches or interest.
I think this is a very important point for our friends who are here involved in this. We always noticed that when there is a problem of this magnitude, and then the do-gooders come from everywhere, and we end up with 10 initiatives on the table, usually it is used to stall any solution. Yeah. I recall Bashir inviting, actually, various mediators to solve, but then wasting just a waste of time. We really hope that everybody works together. And it's very important. I see the UN sitting next to the African Union. I think you need to work together as one. The international envoys need to work behind you as one, because we need to see one approach there. Otherwise, people will start playing games. You know that. You are more experienced than me with those people. Please, sorry,
no, actually,
that's a very important point you mentioned. I think to get the one. You told me that this kind of war.
The forefront also having a mission there to help the transition, which is.
Need to reach there, yeah. The question we asked President Ruto, because he's supposed to go, but he says it's not safe to fly. There's a problem of securing a safe airport for people to fly in, because some African leaders were supposed to fly in, including yourself. But you could not find, they said, a place to land. So this is a problem. You told me that this war now, nobody can really secure victory. Can you be an outright victor there? Is that your assessment?
Yes, I think so. I think this is not a war between an army and a small rebellion group. This is almost like two armies.
Two armies.
Yeah, yeah. So and well trained, well armed, and all that.
Yeah.
So and also, you see, for us as Sudanese, we do not believe that even if one faction claimed victory over the corpse and the deaths of your people, what victory is this? It's total nonsense. It's a senseless, absolutely, it's a senseless war. And there is nobody who is going to come out of this victorious. That's why it has to stop. It's a senseless war. It is against everything in the country.
Yeah. And hopefully after the war, do you think the civil society, the political parties will have learned from their mistakes, which enabled all this nonsense?
I really hope so, because, as you put it, there is blames on all sides. There are mistakes made by all sides. But I also think crisis comes with opportunities. If our political space will learn the lesson that there is need to work together, we need to work on what you can call a common denominator program,
Exactly.
which might not be high. Politics is an art of compromise in the interest of the country.
Yeah.
Because these high programs, up, left, right, up, down, you won't find the country itself to implement it.
So exactly.
Absolutely.
I think it's right to issue a call from here for our civil society, our political parties, our democratic forces to really come together to get this country into a safe place. Get your country back first. Get democracy first. Get your constitution first. Establish your civil rule first, and then argue whether you know what ideology you want, what kind. But first, get your country first before you decide what colors you want to paint it.
This is exactly the point. We've talked a lot over the last 60 years about we need to agree on how to govern Sudan, not who to govern it.
Yeah.
If we agree on that, establish the basis on which the country can move forward, then the issue of who rules, leave it to the Sudanese people. They can decide this. So I think that objective still holds, and we need to work on it.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. And I'm fanatic about the time, and we need to be really, so I have to watch also the clock here. I want to open the floor for questions or very short statements, 1 minute. Who would like, of course, Rabat, you want to speak. Stand up, please give him a mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very, very much for this talk. For me, affectionately, it was the most touching debate I attend in this fora. I will be extremely brief. We have said after the conclusion of talk under the auspices of African Union and with the support of Ethiopia in August 2019, that this agreement is fragile. And this agreement will suffer from two major causes of collapse. Number one is the extreme fragmentation of the political arena and the military arena. Number two is the wrong way that in Africa in general we deal with transition. Transition is like a fragile camel. If you put too much weight on his back, he will fall down. So the transition cannot have any program but to respond to the emergencies of population needs and organizing elections. Yeah. If you put more weight on it, it will collapse.
It is high expectations.
But it is exactly what happened.
People think have a revolution, next morning everything is...
And we have said,
yeah.
The chairperson have said it, he has instructed me many times to repeat it. We say for all political arena, if you create difficulty for Dr. Hamdok, you will have one of the two, either the chaos or the military regime. You have to choose. So they have no choice. But unfortunately, what I have outlined very clearly in a book I have published on this experience, Dr. Hamdok knows that very much, is that the lack of governing culture was the major weakness of this very large scope of political arena. So this is, we have one day to withdraw the lesson. But now, the focus should be on following issues. And that is where we are working in African Union, with United Nations, with European Union, with League Arab, with IGAD, with Troika, with IQUAD, with all those who want to be involved.
Yeah.
Stop the war immediately. How? We have to put our collective and common pressure on the two generals to make them stop it. and to threaten them. I say that very clearly, that if they don't do so, they will expose themselves to the criminal tribe because they will become maybe a war criminal. So we have to make the most strong way on them to stop. If we do that collectively, in the same way, without any rivalry, without any divergence, I am sure that it will bring the result. Number two, that we have very urgently to open humanitarian corridors, coming from Chad, coming from Central African Republic, coming from Ethiopia, coming from Egypt, coming from everywhere to alleviate the suffering of the population. And the third, we have to ask civil society and political parties and all those who are not holding weapon to raise their voice. It is time. You have said at the beginning that Dr. Hamdok speaks. I know that he has spoken a little bit, but he has to speak more loudly, and he has to speak with 100,000 of politicians, of civil society militants. We should not only listen to the voice of weapon. We have to listen to the voice of the people and its elite. Thank you.
Thank you. I can take one or two questions. Oh, I see a lot of hands here. I'm embarrassed to choose. You choose. You always end up with difficult jobs, okay?
We can hear from here, maybe a sister there.
Hello.
Okay, so there are many of them.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
السلام عليكم دكتور حمدوك. السلام عليكم سمو إبراهيم. أهلا الملاذ. And I'm from Sudan.
أهلا.
And it's a pleasure seeing you both here, and I'm glad to see all of you engaging in trying to find a solution for Sudan. I want to tell an anecdote, a story of what's happening at the moment to my family and cousins that we had to evacuate from Khartoum to safety. But one of my cousin families, their house was taken over by the RSF. They were forced to cook food for them. And if we hadn't have managed to evacuate them in time, they were going inside the house. Were only 4 girls there, and they had to sneak at night to avoid a catastrophic implications that could result in rape, as we've seen of what the militias could do, or what the forest. Now, when you talk about victory in Sudan, or when you talk about stopping fires, how do you deal with a force that has a culture of rape and violations and looting? And how can you imagine a scenario where both of them exist in the country and hope for democracy and hope for peace? Isn't that a little bit of a wishful thinking from all of us to imagine that there is a group that is capable of committing these sort of crimes against civilians on ground that we're witnessing, that they will just give up, to these calls and to these things? This is the first thing. And the second thing,
I think one thing is enough to allow, please.
The second
we have
part
to allow
is
other people to speak also.
International community.
Please, go ahead. We said 1 minute, please, everybody, because we're running out of time.
Très bien, merci. Allô? Je vous remercie de me donner l'opportunité. Je suis de la Guinée, un pays en transition. Comme vous le savez, actuellement en Afrique de l'Ouest, il y a la transition en cours. La question que je veux...
Which are under transition. So the question that I would like to ask to Mr. Abdalla, what are the lessons that we can draw from the failure of the transition in Sudan to support the other transitions which are ongoing in West Africa. As my friend Lebat said, the first conflict that it comes between the politicians and the junta is the definition between the transition. The military people want to refound the state, do another census, do everything before giving the power to the civilians. And the political party which are able to go to the elections that have enough people to vote for them, they want the mission of the transition to mainly be focused on the organization of elections. What are the conditions to gather before we go to the elections? In our case, what brought us to set a deadline that was not good for the military, for the length of the transition, because the military wanted the political parties to submit a report on the mission and the deadline of the transition. We, political parties, we said the only mission is to gather everything that should lead us to inclusive and transparent elections. And for that, we need a file, an organization that will deal with the election. We need material, technical operator, and all this would not take more than 12 to 15 months. And for them, they risk their lives to take the power, and we don't want them to continue taking advantage of this, and they needed 40 months or more. So this is the conflict. What are the lessons that we can draw from the failure of the transition in Sudan? Because I think there is a failure because there is war, and the associations of civilians to manage the transition. As you know, in Guinea, we started calling a former person working at the United Nations, Mohamed Bera, but there are divergences between him and the junta, so he easily negotiated his withdrawal because he didn't want to have any confrontation with the military.
Not a question, because neither of us speak French,
Yeah.
so I have no clue what you said.
Exactly.
But I assume it is a statement. What we'll do, we're gonna check the recording to understand what you said. My apology. Please, is that a statement or question? Is that a statement or question? Okay.
Nigeria, a post-conflict country. And my question is, looking at what is happening in Sudan, does he think the decisions taken earlier on for a coup or forceful removal of a government was the best thing to do? I think Africa must start to look at other ways, and I want him to answer that because
You said question, no?
That question, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
You wanna deal with that question?
The coup.
Can you repeat the question? He did not.
Looking at all of the difficulties and the challenges you're facing now, do you think a coup or a forceful removal of a government, in spite of the difficulties, is the best option?
Forced removal of which government? Which coup? We had so many coups. Which one?
That's the point. That's the point. It's come from one coup to another coup to a transition, and all of the challenges that are now attending in a situation where everybody is now in a crisis. Is that a right option to
We are all against military coups. I mean, Moussa Faki will tell you. We suspend people who have coups.
No, I don't
What
think.
a question.
Yeah, let's
It's
be very
becoming
clear.
an
Yeah.
option. As
No.
you look at West Africa, most people
No,
are now going back to that.
I don't think the coup is an option at all to restore democracy or whatever. I don't think we should guard against this. I think the idea of this emerging coups in West Africa, also in Sudan, and I thought, as it was said, I think yesterday by President Ruto, that we thought these military coups are an act of the past. We should guard against this.
I thought our sister, we agreed here that never trust the soldiers. We agreed that. Yes, everybody agreed that? Never trust the soldiers.
But I think we need to have a much more in-depth discussion about the role of the military in politics. This is something we need to put it on the table, discuss it with them, and reach a point where they need to go and do the things that they are trained to do and not to involve in the politics, the idea of the military being part of, under the civilian control and all this.
The job of the military is to be at the border to protect the country.
Absolutely.
And I don't see many countries in Africa are under foreign threat. I don't think many countries want to invade you guys. And so we spend all this money on all those generals, and what do? They come to the capital and they shoot us. We paid for these bullets. We paid for their uniform. And every guy holding a stick and going around, I don't know, what is this? We really need to ensure in future the civilian control of the military.
Take last point here.
And it's not to,
on this side, take the last point here, maybe.
One last point, because we're running out of time.
Yes.
You choose.
Yeah, my friend Abdullah Janeh here can speak, yeah.
Abdullah, you always make statements. It's a question. No. You make a question.
Yes, okay, microphone.
Give me a microphone, please.
ممكن نقول حاجة برايم مينستر حمدوك لو ممكن بس احنا في اثنين سودانيين هنا عايزين نقول حاجة.
ممكن نقولها بعد.
Okay. I just wanted.
Mo, you are controlling this. Mo, I'm not chairing this session.
Who is controlling the mics here? Well, that's why we talk about civilian control, you know?
Okay. Thank you.
I want to preface my question by no comment. I think more you sabotage my mind, but it's okay.
Go ahead.
You raised an important question. I hope this gathering here will look at the role of the military in Africa. Yes. We don't need armies. I'm telling you, but that's a comment, and I don't want to dive. But first, Mr. Prime Minister, Sudan is in a special sub-region. Yeah. Wealthy countries, to what extent they believe in democratic dispensations is something that I don't want to comment on. But don't you think that really to solve the issues in Sudan, is the sub-region that should take the primary role? Because if they let what's happening in Sudan continue, they themselves would have problems eventually. So how do you mobilize your sub-region? Do you believe that they should take the primary role? And if so, how do you mobilize their support to really bring this madness that's happening in Sudan?
Yes, for sure. I think this is definitely, we go with the motto of the African solutions to African problems. We're very happy to go through that. But also, I think the leaders of this region, immediately after the crisis, they met under the, I think, an invitation from President Ruto. They met here and they took a decision by forming a committee of 3 presidents. And we hope they will be able to reach the country. But also, I must say that the effort that is spearheaded by the region has to work in tandem and in harmony with the rest of the world, the region. We need the African Union, we need the Arab League, the EU, we need the neighbor, we need the Quad, the world, all of them, the UN role. And I think all this, if we are to put all this effort in one sort of direction, that will help us solve this crisis. Any fragmentation in this is counterproductive. We should guard against that.
In that spirit, maybe our brother Musa Faki, you need to have a word with the 3 African countries sitting at the Security Council who blocked the resolution, saying IGAD should make resolution, not Security Council. You should make resolutions together, not block each other, because the optics was terrible. I read in the newspapers, in the British newspaper, African countries block the UN Security Council resolution on Sudan. I say, oh my God, that is not right. Optics looks very bad.
Absolutely, Mo. We need to appreciate the gravity of the situation.
Somebody needs to talk to those guys and say, hey, you need to work together, not to appear to be paralyzing the Security Council. I think because time is I know there are a lot of issues. Please, the chairperson want to make a statement, please.
Here. Mustafa, my translator. Je voudrais tout simplement préciser que le 20
I
avril,
would simply like
It's not working.
We can I can speak Arabic. I can
avril.
understand Arabic.
yes,
أو إنجليزي يا موسى.
اتكلم عربي لا اتكلم عربي.
on April 20, I called for a meeting for the whole international community,
Yeah.
UN, IGAD,
It's not
Arab
there is no
League,
translation.
European Union, Troika, Quad, Trilateral, African, the E3 is African member of the Security Council.
Yeah.
The objective is to coordinate
Yeah.
the international community position on Sudan.
Yeah.
We set up a following up group, African Union, IGAD, UN, EU, Arab League, all of them.
Okay.
We want the international community to use one voice in this issue.
Yeah.
So we are working together.
Excellent.
No,
The
that's
solution
wonderful.
should be a Sudanese-led process,
Yeah.
supported by the region,
And the international.
by the continental organization, and all partners.
We fully agree with that.
It is absolutely necessary.
Thank
As
you.
you know, Sudan is in a geographical specific position. The history of this country, we should absolutely take on account this reality.
Thank you very much. While you are standing up, I have a small question for you.
Yes, go ahead.
Are you ready at some stage to send peacekeepers to Khartoum?
Absolutely. I was ready to travel to Khartoum.
Yeah, because
Peace and
how are we going to
Security Council
separate
met
all these
in the
ceasefires?
16th of April.
Who will going to monitor it? And, you know,
I am ready, even going by road. to
wonderful.
Excellent.
I
Thank you.
asked the two generals to create the condition for us to go to Khartoum and to deal with them
Please.
immediately.
Please, thank you very much.
Immediately.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what we want from the African Union, really. Allow me to really thank my friend, Dr. Abdalla Hamdok. A man who really tried hard to establish a democratic state in Sudan. The project is not finished yet, and I hope somehow it will happen. Even after all this blood, we'll manage still to get back our country. Thank you, Abdallah. Please.
Very much more.